Coming up on Tech News Today, does Steve Jobs hate Eric Schmidt? We'll find out. Also, iPhone supply chain indicates, we're not going to see an iPhone 5 till fall at the earliest. And Libyan rebels roll their own cell phone network. All that and more coming up.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Wednesday, April 13th, 2011. Tech News Today is brought to you by MailRoute.info. MailRoute is a secure hosted service that provides enterprise-grade virus and spam filtering to companies of any size. Try right now, absolutely free, at MailRoute.info. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Tom Merritt.
I'm Sarah Lane.
I'm Iyaz Akhtar.
I'm Jason Howell. This is the show where we kick around the tech news of the day along with y'all, try to make some sense of it. Joining us for the show is Mr. Nilay Patel of a yet-to-be-named gadget website.
Hey, well, no, this is my next podcast. You can come visit us there.
Okay, that's right. This is my next podcast.com is the one named thing.
Yes, but it's not the final name. It's just kind of where we're hanging out.
It's a beta.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can still find the old gang there. Who else on that show? You've got a cast of thousands or so.
Well, so it's me, Josh, and Paul from the old Engadget podcast. We're doing our new show there. And then, Chris Sigler, Joanna Stern, Ross Miller came along with us. And, we're planning on having all kinds of other guests as we go along. So it'll be fun. It'll be the same but different,
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it, and thanks for joining us today. Let's start off with some news out of Mix in Las Vegas. Microsoft's Joe Belfiore went on stage and immediately apologized. He started talking about the fact that, we know that the carriers have not been delivering the updates for Windows Phone like we said we were supposed to have one in January, and we're sorry about that. But then he went into some more positive developments and announced some developer revolutions, some developer features for Mango, which will be the next major Windows Phone 7 release. There's going to be some sort of SSL update between now and fall, but he said sometime by the end of the year, sometime in fall, we will get Mango cut and paste scheduled. Mango will update with multitasking. You'll have IE9 in there. And they're giving the developers a lot more control over the accelerometer, over the cameras, giving them direct control so that they can make some better apps and take advantage of those live tiles a little better as well.
Shouldn't they be bundling in IE10?
Yeah, they announced IE10 at Mix.
Yeah,
well, considering IE10 runs on ARM and most of these phones do, I guess they have a chance to do it. But it's kind of interesting to see this guy go up there and go, sorry.
I don't think he has a choice.
Well, he kind of blamed AT&T. I mean, he was like, we had an update, it didn't go so well. AT&T was pretty slow, and AT&T is their feature partner in the States.
Well, that's a popular position to do if you're running some kind of phone OS to kick AT&T. I've seen this somewhere before. Turtleneck fellow.
Well, now that brings up the question, right? All of this stuff is great. Mango, we should have now. I mean, Microsoft needs, Paul Thurrott says this on Windows Weekly all the time, Microsoft needs to iterate Windows Phone faster. They're behind, and they're iterating it slower. But one of the reasons is because they want to get it right, which is a good reason. But another reason is it takes so damn long for the carriers. The cut and paste update isn't even out for AT&T yet, even though it's officially out. How is Apple able to do that where they can get their firmware on the phone through AT&T here in the United States without any kind of delay, but Microsoft can't?
Is that just simply because they have the full solution of iTunes plus the phone? Because does Windows Phone have to sync with anything at all, or can you just buy the phone and just use
Windows
it as a phone?
it syncs with Zune, right? But that's like one layer. I mean, so Microsoft sells the software, licenses the software to Samsung, who then sells the device to AT&T. So there's a lot of middlemen between Microsoft and the consumer. And I think that's kind of a big holdup. If you look at the updates they have tried to push out, they had big problems with them already. The first update was just an update to get ready for more updates. And it had problems on Samsung devices. So I think they're very gun shy. They don't want to screw up their consumer relationships any more than they already have. And I think there's a caution on Microsoft's part, and that's buffered even more so by the fact they have to go through their manufacturers who then have to go through the carriers. And you have to think that they know to be faster, and they know there's an urgency here, but they are being much more. They don't want to get in a situation where every Windows Phone update, the media is like ready for problems, right? They're ready to report on Windows Phone update problems because it's part of the narrative, and I think they want to make sure the next one is flawless.
They're getting Angry Birds.
Yeah.
That's good
exciting.
news. That's positive, right?
It's funny. It's like Angry Birds seems to be like the bundled in good news. By the way, not everything is wrong. Angry Birds.
Well, they're getting
favorite
Skype
game.
too.
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean,
That's a
my
very good
DVD
point.
player runs Angry Birds now, but like they're getting Skype. They're doing some other stuff. This update is kind of the update that makes Windows Phone competitive. Like not super competitive yet on a feature level or apps level, but on this is what you need a modern operating system to do. It has to multitask. We're finally going to take advantage of live tiles, and so they got to get it out. And these apps, Angry Birds, Skype, these are like must-have table stakes apps. If you don't have Angry Birds, you're not competitive.
You're
with
nobody
Toaster,
if
right?
you don't have Angry Birds. It's funny though when you go to Microsoft's "Where's My Phone" update page, which I mean they're trying to be as transparent as possible and make sure that you have as few questions as necessary. But you look at the delivering / not applicable / testing phase for a variety of different phones, and I'm not surprised that consumers have kind of had it.
But Angry Birds is coming May 25th.
Oh, right. Yes. Well, that makes everything better. I don't really need cut and paste if I have Angry Birds.
That's a really good point. The cut and paste has been ready since January, and it was released over a month ago, and AT&T phones still don't have it. Mango, as you say, Nilay, is got the features that you need to have in a modern OS right now in April 2011. When this is released, it's going to be fall at the earliest, 2011. And then when is it going to show up on an AT&T phone? They're going to be they may be over a year behind at that point, or almost a year behind.
Doesn't that mean they're kind of doomed the way the Zune was? I mean, the Zune was really cool, and it was great, an awesome machine for 5 years ago. So you just think that Windows Phone 7 is going to drop out? I mean, I would think they have the right partnerships that could probably sustain this kind of mess with Nokia. And if they get on Verizon to any big degree, I think eventually they could probably gain some traction because people are comfortable with Windows. I mean, that sounds a little nuts, but they are comfortable with it. And it is a different user experience compared to Android, which kind of looks like iOS. Everything kind of looks the same. And Windows Phone 7 does look a little interesting compared to the other two.
I think they're banking on, they want to get these the true multitasking in there. They have multitasking for their own apps, but not for developer apps. They want to get these features in there. They haven't actually announced all of the front-facing features, the UI features that consumers will be concerned with. These are just the developer features. So there's more to come on Mango, and I think they want to make a big splash for the holiday season. They're hoping that they can make Windows Phone look really attractive. They'll probably come out with their first Nokia device by the end of this year. At least that's what Stephen Elop is really pushing for, is to have at least one Nokia phone with Windows Phone 7 on it. It would probably be a Mango phone. I think they have to do that to stay in the race.
The easiest way to get new software on a carrier, as sad as this is to put out a new round of devices.
Yeah, right.
Right? And so if you think they're going to make a big holiday push, they're going to put out Mango in the fall time frame. They'll probably put out some maybe dual-core phones or something like that. There you go. There's a new software with all the new features, and everybody with the old phones is kind of left out in the cold. And hopefully it doesn't come to that, but we've seen that play out with Android devices even quite a lot.
Now, we've been covering the National Association of Broadcasters Conference in Las Vegas, going on at the same time as Mix right across town. Big announcement last night at a super user meetup. Apple announced Final Cut Pro 10. How long has it been since they had a last Final Cut?
I think it was 2009.
2009 sounds
That's
right, yeah. So this was a huge deal, and basically it will be available in June via the Mac App Store for $299.
$300 for Final Cut is awesome.
Redonkulous.
Yeah,
But
even
it's not
if
sweet.
Yeah,
Right,
that's
because
true.
you used to pay $1,000
That's right.
to get Final Cut Pro and soundtrack and color and all that other stuff.
They have not announced
Motion
details on
and
Final Cut
compressor.
Studio, which is the one that has Motion and Soundtrack Pro and all of that
But
stuff.
a lot of people don't need that stuff. Like, I'm happy to pay $300 and just get Final Cut. Like, that
I am
makes my
too,
life easy.
Nilay. That's at TWiT. I mean, we use the suite in all our editing workstations. I never use anything beyond Final Cut, but Final Cut Express, which of course is the more cost-effective solution for Final Cut users, isn't quite feature-rich enough for me. So I need Final Cut Pro, the actual the full version of the software. $300 for Final Cut Pro. Which is, I mean, $300 for Final Cut Pro of the version that I'm using now would have been a great savings. But this is a better version of Final Cut.
And Express was like $199, right? It was something like, it wasn't cheap, like super. It wasn't like $50.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we may be bearing the lead here. I mean, Final Cut Pro 10 is a whole new interface. It can do a lot of things that Final Cut couldn't. Handles up to 4K resolution. It gets rid of a lot of the rendering problems, so you don't have to sit there and wait for it to render between edits. Even when you're transferring media, you can start editing immediately.
Fully 64-bit compatible.
It's finally fully. They're like, we're not going to support OS 9 anymore in Final Cut. We're making it 64-bit.
They're doing image stabilization and import, which makes shooting with like a DSLR, like a 5D or a 7D.
They put a lot of thought too into audio channels, audio tracks.
Good.
I know, it's like anybody who edits is like, oh, thank you, because there's a lot of room in that department for improvement. But yeah, I mean, it looks like a better version of Final Cut, and for anybody who's using Final Cut regularly, the more, and especially because this price margin puts it into the hands of a lot more people. I mean, we keep talking about companies who are lowering the prices of very professional, feature-rich software that has been in the past cost prohibitive for a lot of people. So this is all of a sudden a lot of more people are going to have their hands on Final Cut, and they're going to need to be learning how it works. Anybody who's played around with Final Cut knows it's not always very intuitive. So the more intuitive they can make it, the better. And it sounds like that's what they're doing.
I think it actually brings up a lot of questions because the UI is not totally different. It's been revised a bit. It actually looks a little bit more like iMovie compared to Final Cut. And if you've used Final Cut, you have this kind of, you're familiar with it. It's really ugly. It's not one of these pretty user experiences, but you're doing your work on it. And I'm really wondering if they've dumbed down anything so that you don't have the same kind of controls. I'm really hoping that they have kept all the professional controls there because I haven't seen this thing in action. On top of that, at $299, will they kill Final Cut Express? Because there's really no reason to have a $199 price point anymore. But I'm also just happy with the idea that I can just download this on the App Store. I don't have to keep finding my DVDs because Final Cut Studio Pro is like a Final Cut Pro Studio.
It's like a 5 CD installation process.
And that's a real pain. You get your 5 licenses, you just hit the little button and install. And for me, that's a lot easier because I keep moving every month.
I read an interview with Randy Ubilos, who's the product manager for Final Cut, and they asked him, is this just iMovie Pro? And his response was, we made a professional product for professional users. I mean, they're number one in this space for pro video editing. I don't think they're going to risk it on, check out our ridiculous iMovie timeline that we're enforcing on pro users. And if they do, they clearly have no idea what they're doing.
They actually did something very similar to this when they picked up Logic years ago. And the interface, I mean, Logic is still just as powerful. It's an audio, their professional audio suite. It's just as powerful as it ever was. It was just a lot uglier, and the interface needed a lot of work. And they came in, they made changes. People were worried about it. Ultimately, it didn't matter. It still is very powerful. I think it's the same thing here.
Yeah, this sounds like it is a professional suite that they have not dumbed it down. Automatically scales CPU-intensive tasks to fully utilize multi-core processors, offloading certain tasks to the GPUs, offering a major performance boost, even doing some frame recognition so they can tell which shots are close, which are medium, which are wide, and collect those clips together so it's easier to pick those things out and drag them into the timeline. And like you say, they've redone the interface so that hopefully it's more intuitive. I think you're right. I think a lot of people are going to be like you, Iyaz. They're going to say, who cares about Final Cut Express, whether it's gone or not? $299, I can get the real thing, and I can download it from the App Store. And now we see one of the first brilliances of the Mac App Store is I don't have to order it online. I can just download freaking Final Cut. With it's almost too easy to spend $300.
At $300, don't you also run into the issue of competitors? Are they going to have to bring their prices down? Is Premiere going to be cheaper, or is there, I guess, Premiere Elements? Is that going to get more advanced? I mean, I really want to see.
I was talking about this with Chad Mumm, who produces the Engadget show. He's a good friend, and it's funny because Apple makes its money from selling hardware. They sell phones and they sell Macs, and that's 50%, right, each. And their software sales they're way down in the chart. They don't really make a blip. And so they can afford to cut the price on something like Final Cut Pro to drive Mac sales, to drive Mac Pro sales, which are, hugely lucrative and have huge margins. And Adobe can't do that. Avid can't do that. So Apple's able to put incredible price pressure on its competitors in markets where it's not banking on that revenue, right? I mean, if Final Cut goes away for Apple tomorrow, they'll be fine. They'll still sell Macs, but Final Cut drives the sales of Macs, so they can be like, we're going to lower the price of this. You know, we'll make a little bit of profit on it, but we'll make the big profit on Mac Pro sales and display sales. And that's really powerful for Apple. And that kind of sucks for Adobe and Avid in like a big way.
Well, it also kind of sucks for anybody who, as you were saying, well, gee, I hope it's not too dumbed down or too different because we're already Final Cut Pro users. I mean, what's our other choice, right? We're not going to jump over to Premiere and like learn a whole new system that costs twice as much either. We're sort of forced to adapt or to use an older version of Final Cut.
I'm just thinking if Adobe wants to actually operate in the same space, if they actually want to be in the Mac App Store, well, they got to pay 30%. I mean, you can obviously do the download on the web and everything, but Apple's got this nice built-in, easy delivery system with their operating system.
Can you download Premiere on the web right now?
I think you can download a trial. I got to double check. But I know it's a lot of Adobe products.
I'm pretty sure you can. Yeah, most if not all of the Adobe products are downloadable through their site. And you can usually get a trial, to start off with.
But can you get the whole thing like as a package that you download? I guess is my question.
Yeah, it looks like you can.
I always buy Adobe CS and like physical media, so I have discs. I haven't really tried to download it.
Well, and that's what's interesting too. I'll be interesting to see what they do with price point for Final Cut Studio with motion and color and all of that, and whether it's also available in the App Store or if that one's something you got to order online or go into the store and grab, because you think people want to have those discs. They want to have that backed up, and they're probably going to want to make a little more money off of the professionals who need that full studio. Whereas somebody like me, if I really want to edit something, I got plenty of people with Final Cut machines around me. There's no reason for me to buy it. But at $300 in the App Store, I probably won't, but it does become more tempting for me to go, well, maybe I could just have it on my machine. That way it's there, where I never would have considered that when I had to go online and buy it at a higher price.
My guess is that the other studio software programs will also be offered in the App Store, but separately.
Yeah.
Another $49 for motion.
You'll have to buy each one of them. Yeah. They'll probably offer a physical box that's studio that has it all together at a reduced price, or you can go in the App Store and buy each one individually at a higher price.
Exactly.
That makes sense. All right, let's get on to the next story about Stephen Levy's book, In the Plex, based on his 2 years of research at the company. And he says that Steve Jobs was so furious when he saw Android's pinch-to-zoom features during a trip to Google headquarters, he hid the iPad development from Google's CEO Eric Schmidt, even though Schmidt was on the board of directors of Apple at the time. We actually talked about this on This Week in Google, whether this was an attempt to drum up some interest in the book In the Plex, or if or if this is really how it went down. Nilay, you wrote up an interesting analysis of this on your blog today.
Yeah, I've been reading In the Plex. It's really good. If you're interested in Google, you should grab it. He has any book that's written with that kind of access usually has some interesting tidbits in it. But this story about Apple, I mean, it's like 2 pages long in the book, and the book is several hundred pages long. So it really does feel like it was released as part of the publicity of the book. And particularly the stuff with Android and pinch to zoom and features. When Android was first being developed, the first prototypes of it, they looked like a BlackBerry, right? And that's, and Andy Rubin came from Sidekick, and you can see how he would develop sort of a more Windows Mobile-y BlackBerry kind of device as his first go. And it wasn't until the iPhone came out that we started seeing Android prototypes that looked like the iPhone. And so you have to wonder, it has this timeline sort of been artificially compressed. I really doubt that the very first version of Android that Steve Jobs saw had pinch to zoom and worked like an iPhone. It doesn't seem to make any sense because, the G1 came out, it didn't have any support for multi-touch at all, just zero. And Google said, maybe we'll add it down the road. And then the Droid 2 came out, and it had the frameworks for multi-touch. Or not the Droid 2. The Droid with Android 2.0 came out. It had the frameworks for multi-touch, but did not have pinch to zoom in the United States. And Motorola shipped it as the milestone in Europe and added pinch to zoom sort of selectively in the browser. And then the Nexus 1 came out and still didn't have pinch to zoom. And so by then, the dominant thread was that Apple has a patent on pinch to zoom and gestures, and Google is scared. But that doesn't even make any sense because Microsoft was shipping Surface computers. HP was shipping, all-in-ones that were touchscreens.
And then in February 2010, pinch to zoom came to Android.
And then last year it came to Android, and now every device has it. And I'm looking at the patents. When Apple sues HTC or Motorola sues Apple back, you can look at the patents they're claiming, and none of them seem to directly cover this gesture that's been around forever. So this story about Steve Jobs going to the Googleplex and seeing pinch to zoom on an Android device and saying, "Oh my God, this act of betrayal is so deep," it seems like it's a narrative that's sexy. It's probably some version of the truth.
Boy, what a sexy story.
Right, but I don't.
Can't think
I don't
of
see
anything
him
more
like
titillating.
shaking his fist,
pinching.
It's Sergey Brin and being like, "You were my son." I just don't see it.
I will
I
pinch
think
and
people
zoom
just
you.
like the idea of Steve Jobs. The idea of he kept the iPad a secret from the people at Google. He was so furious that they loved the idea of pinch to zoom because it's a really good feature on a touchscreen. But
the thing with the iPad is that it really just runs iOS, and they were forking iOS to run a new class of devices. And Eric Schmidt was at Apple on the board, already recusing himself from iPhone-related board meetings.
Well, and no wonder they would hide iPad from Eric Schmidt when they're like, "Hey, you guys are getting into the same businesses as us. It's been great working with you."
And if you think, Google had done Chrome OS, they touch on this briefly, or Stephen Levy touches on this briefly in the book as well, that Google had done Chrome OS, which competes with Safari and is built on WebKit. They were from the very beginning, there was talk of like Chrome actual hardware that ran Chrome OS. There's this whole he hid the iPad as an act of retribution. I think it's a conflated story, and I think the real story of what Apple has in terms of IP on multi-touch and gestures and what's valid and what other companies can do and what other companies are willing to risk in terms of liability, that story is going to be foggy for years and years until some of these lawsuits either settle or go in front of a judge or, somebody just starts talking. And right now, nobody is talking.
It sounds like the takeaway from this is that In the Plex is a great book, and this is probably one of the less interesting parts of it.
It's an interesting part. It's a Steve Jobs and Google story. So it's interesting for, the narrative, but In the Plex is more interesting because it's a book about how Google started, what they want to do, and how they've built a company around that vision. And if you're interested in that, you should go read it because that stuff is fascinating. Whether or not Steve Jobs is mad at Eric Schmidt is these are two huge companies. I don't think either executive really believes that their emotions should guide their business decisions at that level anymore.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Motorola is the top brand. We'll tell you why. They are more popular than Apple, or at least we'll speculate. Libyans are also putting together their own rebel mobile phone company in Libya. We'll talk a little bit about that. But first, I want to tell you about MailRoute. The ability to get rid of spam is at your hands. MailRoute.info. I use it on my subbrilliant.com email addresses because it does it. It takes away spam. I mean, these were the most spam-filled email addresses I owned, and they are usable again because MailRoute's Tom Johnson has figured out an algorithm that identifies the good stuff, it sends it back along to you, and takes the bad stuff and dumps it in a vault where you can look at it, make sure there were no false positives. I haven't seen one yet. Check it out, mailroute.info. Small business accounts start at $2 per user per month for 10 users. And because of demand from TWiT, MailRoute has added a new service for individual users as well, less than $30 per user per year for single users. If you want to implement MailRoute, you just need to know how to edit an MMX record or have somebody do it for you, and then you can be free of spam on your domain. Visit mailroute.info and sign up with the email filtering that I use. Let's go to this brand survey. Okay, so these kinds of things always are a little vague because they don't tell you exactly how they do them. But Harris Interactive, Equitrend, operated a poll where they surveyed people and asked them about the brands they use and what they think about them. And Mobile Brand of the Year goes to Motorola. They say that Motorola satisfies a much wider audience than other competitors. Number 2, HTC. Number 3, Sony Ericsson. Number 4, Nokia. Somebody missing?
Yeah.
Microsoft. No, wait. Number 5, Apple.
Oh, 5? That's not right. How could they possibly be so far down?
The poll was conducted over 2 weeks in January with 25,099 consumers aged 15 and older in the sample. Covered all mobile phones, not just smartphones. So that may be one of the keys here.
I was just trying to think. HTC does make a ton of different phones and lower priced phones. And of course, Motorola also still has like old Razrs sitting around that give away for free. So I mean, everybody's got access to that. I would assume that this is not really talking about the Zoom, like being so awesome that it dethroned everything.
No, it's probably the Razr.
It's probably these little cheap phones.
Yeah.
What is this metric? I mean, I'm seeing numbers here from. I'm sorry, I'm off camera because I'm peering at these numbers. 56 to 65.
That's the number of brandness, as far as I can tell.
I'm just curious as to what that is.
If you click through to Harris Interactive, it doesn't become any more clear as far as the press release. I imagine if you actually buy the study, then you'd get something. But it's some kind of index number that they come to by giving you, again, they give you a survey. And then they have some metrics, some proprietary metrics that they run. Each respondent was asked to rate a total of 60 randomly selected brands. Each brand received approximately 1,000 ratings. Data were weighted to be representative of the entire U.S. population. So, you know, they take all that and they put it together and they come up with this number. And the number is their rating number.
You know what Iyaz and I were both talking earlier saying, you know, it's important to remember that not everybody has a smartphone. And yes, of course, that factors into it. And it's easy to be sort of inside the Silicon Valley bubble and forget that. One of the interesting things about this particular survey is that the survey goes down to people as young as 15. Okay, well, if you're a 15-year-old, I remember when I was, well, not 15, but 16, you know, I got like the hand-me-down car, which was like the crappy car of my family type thing. It's like that might also be factoring into this as well. That feature phones for somebody who, you know, was in college and the parents go, okay, you got to have a phone, but it's going to be like the lamest phone possible, the cheapest phone with the least amount of minutes, only use it when you're in an emergency. That's probably factoring into this as well.
And younger folks probably use an iPod Touch. For their smartphone type of capabilities, and then you're right, some very, you know, inexpensive, probably free with your family plan phone that's likely from Motorola or Nokia or somebody like that.
Any conspiracy theories because these graphs are in Android green? Do you think?
Well, no, actually, and this graph is like super crazy because Motorola has 64.4. And the graph makes it looks like
it's double, the most 60.6.
Double 60.6. You know,
the scale's a little weird.
Oh yeah, I mean, the graph is not to scale.
Also,
there's nothing on the axes.
They also did rate mobile networks. Verizon won out there. AT&T number 2. Clearwire number 3. Sprint number 4, and Virgin Mobile number 5.
Clearwire is number 3.
Yeah,
over real companies.
Over Sprint.
I mean, like, I think we can let this go.
Yeah. I mean, let's move on.
Thanks for playing.
I'm not sure that you can find how many people. It's like 25,000 people. I'm not sure you can find 25,000 people in America who know what Clearwire is.
You'd be surprised down in places like Atlanta where they launched a really aggressive WiMAX a while back. There's some enthusiasts for it, but I think you're right. I don't know that it penetrates. I'm skeptical, anyway, that it penetrates. But
if you went up
Harris
to my mom,
Interactive
like,
says,
you know what Clearwire is? And she'd be like, is that a wire that's clear? I mean, that's like
a wire you can see through, of
fiber
course.
optic company.
There is a new mobile phone company in Libya, thanks to the rebels in Benghazi. They have hacked together a new cell phone network that takes advantage of Libyan Mobile, because Libyan Mobile is the only mobile telephone company in Libya, and it's run out of Tripoli, and it's under Colonel Muammar Gaddafi's control. This is what they did. They got wealthy folks in Qatar and the United Arab Emirates to buy expensive machinery for them that they needed to build their own wireless communications network. They transported the equipment along with some engineers and, of course, bodyguards through Egypt to the Libyan border, didn't get caught, then stole a bunch of numbers from the Libyan General Telecommunications Agency, the existing network, plugged the new equipment into Gaddafi's network, routed it around the central node in Tripoli. They only had one central node, and then hit up the United Arab Emirates for a satellite feed to take free Libyana online, and then started developing pricing plans. They're all prepaid, by the way.
And all in all, I mean, the
local calls are free.
The titles seem like, oh, rebels have taken over and hijacked the cell phone system in Libya, but it's way more complicated than just like, oh, we've taken these things out of the air. This required quite a lot of money to just do this. It's not like this simple.
And it's the brainchild of a telecom exec from Alabama named Usama Abu Shagar, a Libyan American. He had been living in Abu Dhabi, and he teamed up with a couple friends, sketched out on the back of a napkin what they needed, got the equipment, negotiated it, got it into the country, and pirate cell phone network.
Look, here's what I need to know. Do they have the iPhone? Because otherwise, I don't know.
Are they
Well,
GSM or CDMA?
Otherwise, I'm going to stick with AT&T.
It's better than their old system. They were using flags. They were using semaphore.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, in all seriousness, this is the reason that they wanted it was for communication of the army in the rebel resistance of the Libyan army. They were using semaphores. They were using colored flags to say advance or retreat.
And now they can show semaphore via MMS. So that's good.
They can actually.
No, I mean, this is like super. I love these stories. I mean, this is like just this one line here: steal a bunch of phone numbers from the Libyan General Telecom Agency. Like, that's how you know, like, they're serious, and this is awesome. I mean, that's like blue box hacking. That's awesome.
The supplier remains nameless for political reasons. They don't want to get into it, but apparently Huawei is not it because they refuse to get involved, and they've made that clear. So that rules out one suspect. But just and it's the hacker spirit alive in Libya, helping with the rebellion. That's what attracted me.
Should we wildly speculate? Is it Cisco? Is it Cisco? No.
I don't know. I doubt it. I doubt it's Cisco.
There's only a handful, so is it Nokia Siemens?
They did airdrop a bunch of flips.
Oh, that's so awful.
I'm sorry. Okay.
That's like such gallows humor.
You're absolutely right, and I'm ashamed of myself. The New Zealand government has surprised the public by doing something that is even more shameful than the remark I just made. They've been rushing through three-strike-style legislation during an urgency session of Parliament that was called to deal with the Christchurch earthquake. This, if you remember, when everybody's Twitter icons turned black, this was the three strikes law that they were trying to force through Parliament back then. That was then struck off the books, or not struck off the books, but it was not passed because of a huge upwelling of resistance to it, because of this urgency system, which is meant to help make it easy to get aid for the Christchurch earthquake passed quickly. They're able to pass the three strikes law quickly so that there's less debate about it.
And the problem with this is still it's three strikes, as in if the copyright holder claims you've infringed on their copyright, you could lose your internet up to 6 months. This isn't that you actually did anything. It's that if the holder said you did. So that seems really, really harsh. And I'm trying to figure out what's a better penalty than 6 months off the internet? Like, do you throw these people in jail? Do you give them monetary fines?
Well, start throwing them in jail. That makes sense.
Yeah,
don't just cut off their internet. Put them in jail until they can prove their innocence.
The problem with all of these three strikes laws is that you're guilty until proven innocent.
Right.
As soon as somebody says, "Hey, that IP address infringed," it goes down on your record, and the only chance that you have to defend yourself against it is in front of a traffic court. Which tells you something about the level of seriousness this really is. This is the level of traffic court. They're coming up with these tribunals that will rubber stamp through, and you have a chance to defend yourself and try to prove that you didn't infringe. But if you can't do that, then you're fined. And if you just happen to get run through again, then you get disconnected.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine if you, I don't know, compare this to getting a speeding ticket where it's like, sometimes you can be let go on a technicality, but it's like, what a hassle where you're like, I wasn't even on the freeway that day. What are you talking about? But you still have to contact the law enforcement agency and get somebody to sign off on it. And I mean, what a hassle for anybody where this is a case of mistaken identity.
Yeah, well,
if I lived in New Zealand, I would be ticked off.
A private company can send your your license plate information, and if it gets sent in 3 times, then you have to go to court and prove that you weren't breaking traffic laws.
Exactly.
And you could lose your privilege to drive over speeding or not signaling the lane change.
No,
Although I might support that for people who don't signal lane change.
Just sort of playing the other side for a second, you're going to be informed by your ISP when there is a first offense. Mm-hmm. So it's not as if all of a sudden you have 3 strikes against you, your internet's getting cut off, and you have no idea what happened. I mean, you do have time, as far as I understand, to go, well, wait a second, now why have I been targeted unfairly, and figure out maybe what's going on. That's still, if you're not doing anything wrong though, and someone's leeching off your network or whatever, that's still a lot of pain and suffering on your part.
There's also
really isn't your fault.
It is a lot of pain and suffering, but I think a lot of the protests here are centered around 2 things. And I talk about file sharing a lot, and I think copyright law is really broken when it comes to the internet. But file sharing enthusiasts in file sharing protests about file sharing laws usually center around two things. One, everybody's doing this, so it should be legal, which is the sort of I'm speeding on the highway argument.
Right.
And two is, you're gonna ensnare so many people who aren't doing this or don't know that it's illegal, or somebody's leeching off their network. And that's sort of both of those cases are sort of three strikes and you're cut off is way too draconian. But fast tracking, like you have to pay a fine because we caught you file sharing and we sent a letter to your ISP who has a record of your network file sharing, sort of solves like that problem, right? Of alerting grandma that she has to put a password on a network so the kids next door don't share music over it, and letting people who are file sharing, which is illegal, and until that is changed in some way, which is sort of the real problem, letting people who are file sharing know that they're breaking the law. I mean, look, you speed on a highway, you get a ticket. You don't complain that speed limits are stupid.
Yeah. Well, you can, but you still pay a ticket. Yeah.
Right, but that's like the policy, and so this is just a really bad sort of execution of policy.
Yeah, it's a bad execution because of the lack of due process, because of the presumption of guilt, and I would argue the worst part about it is the idea of disconnecting your internet for copyright infringement.
Right, all that stuff is crazy. I mean, I'm in complete agreement there.
Tim Berners-Lee at a MIT symposium was saying access to the web is now a human right. It's possible to live without the web. It's not possible to live without water. But if you've got water, then the difference between somebody who is connected to the web and is part of the information society and someone who is not is growing bigger and bigger. So he acknowledges, like, okay, it may not be essential to living, but like electricity, it has weaved its way into our lives so much that you shouldn't be able to just pull it away for something like copyright infringement.
Right. Well, I mean... Right, because you don't turn off people's electricity or water because they're using too much of it or they're using it wrong.
Yeah.
And this,
or even cut off their phone service because they were using it to call people and set up crimes.
Well, I mean, we have done that. We've done that in this country, right? We told Kevin Mitnick that he couldn't get on the internet again because he was using the internet and technology to hack things and
he couldn't use a phone.
trespass.
He couldn't use a phone either, is what you're saying.
Right. So I mean, there are extreme cases of this, but bringing that sort of
de rigueur,
enforcement, bringing that enforcement to the average consumer, because there is I used to be a file sharing attorney and I defended college kids who got sued for file sharing, and that was ridiculous. I mean, it really should be like traffic court, right? The consequences should be more aligned with traffic court. Well, but the process could very much be like traffic court.
Sarah, we're outnumbered. We got two attorneys.
Isn't that just because the copyright laws were written so long ago that it wasn't so easy to do these violations back then when these things were initially thought of? Now with the internet and everything, it's so much easier to share files and be accidentally, a copyright infringer, like just posting a clip you saw on YouTube. You're like, oh, I like this, I'm putting it up. I mean, it's just because the laws themselves are a little outdated. Is that a fair statement?
The laws are completely outdated. Copyright law, it's right in the name. It's centered around copies and the act of copying. And, copying a book in the 70s was hard, right? It was a hard thing to do. And the presumption was that most people wouldn't make copies, and that the people who were sophisticated enough to make copies knew what they were doing was wrong, so we could punish them. Now everybody makes copies of everything all the time. And they do it without thinking. You do it without even blinking. It's when you stream a file to your Roku box, you're making a local cached copy of that file, right? And you don't think about it because it doesn't make sense, because what you're really after is the content. And copyright law doesn't recognize that you're making all these copies in service of wanting to view the content. And until we get there, until the law actually recognizes that it's no longer making copies that needs to be regulated, but access to content, we're going to run into these problems over and over and over again. And that's a long process.
We got an email
arguing over 3 strikes or not is, it's tangential to that real process of changing the law.
In fact, Randy wrote in from the Netherlands with something that shows them going in the other direction there. He says, to keep it short, the Dutch government is drafting legislation to make the downloading of films and music illegal, which is legal right now. There's a lot of discussion about it, and he included a lot of background information. But obviously, he's using shortcut words here. It's not that they're making any downloading of films or TV illegal, but the unlicensed downloading of them illegal. So it's going to be a long slog, and it's going to take generation change, is my feeling, before this actually gets resolved.
Yeah, it's going to, not to disparage old white guys, but it's going to take our generation has to become the old white guys in charge. before people really understand, before the halls of power understand what's actually happening and how these systems work.
The old brown lawyers in charge.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And then
that'll
our
fix it.
kids will think that we're crazy because they're just beaming it holographically from their brains.
All right, real quickly, Digitimes has an article today that says they've been talking to some upstream suppliers of the kinds of things needed to build new things like iPhones, and they say Apple has not released a production roadmap for iPhone 5, and shipment volumes of iPhone 4 have continued to mount. So as far as the suppliers are concerned, they're not going to be getting a new iPhone out this summer. They'd have to know now. And it looks like the idea of an iPhone 5 coming and being announced in September has got more weight now. These suppliers are sort of the ones who know from the back end, like, hey, we'd be the ones building it. So no iPhone till fall.
But do you believe Digitimes? I mean, that's always the question. Do you believe?
I do,
believe
actually.
Digitimes?
I think Digitimes has a pretty good track record on stuff like this.
This is also
it's whether
not
you
the
believe
first
the
we've heard of it.
manufacturers or not that they're talking about. And in this case, I think they probably got good info. You don't
Yeah.
believe
I
them?
mean, Digitimes, it's throwing darts at a board, man. You know, they have really good sources when it comes to Samsung and MSI and, you know, all the Asian companies. When it comes to Apple, it's always...
But that's why I believe them in this case, is because they're reporting on the Asian suppliers.
Right.
And then they're not saying we got this from Apple. They're not saying, oh, it's a leaked case that implies this. They're saying, hey, the folks who order the parts are saying we haven't got any orders for parts.
That's true. I mean, you know, but it's always... I always think of, when I tell people how to edit, people how to write about Digitimes, it's always make sure you write about this with a grain of salt, just in the back of your mind, because you never know with them. Digitimes reports on all kinds of Apple component rumors, and I think it's about 50-50. That said, I don't believe that the iPhone 5 is coming anytime soon. I think they're going to wait until much later, holidays, even beyond holidays.
Let's move on to the news fuse. Someone managed to get root access to WordPress's servers at WordPress.com. Founder of WordPress, Matt Mullenweg, posted a blog post saying that potentially anything on those servers could have been revealed, which is a little unsettling considering that they don't just host individual accounts. They host accounts for, I don't know, All Things D, CNN, big-name companies. Mullenweg suggests that users use a strong password and use different passwords for different sites. In other words, follow normal good security procedures to protect yourself.
Are you a T-Mobile customer? Do you want to be? Either way, the company's rolling out some new plans for $59 or $79 plus a subsidized device on contract. You'll get unlimited everything, voice, data, and texting. There is a catch, though. If you go over 2 gigabytes of data usage, expect to get reduced speeds. That's T-Mobile speak for throttled until the next billing cycle.
Unlimited, limited usage.
How throttled is throttled, I want to know.
Truly
I can
unlimited
deal with a
passwords.
little throttling, but
Yeah.
not, you know,
Not a
a
full
turtle
choke.
crawl.
Yeah.
Full throttle.
Yeah.
Intel,
It's a different kind of throttle.
Intel, Microsoft, and eBay all agree on something. It's a privacy bill authored by Senators John Kerry and John McCain. The bill would make opting out of tracking a requirement of sites, along with clear notice that you can opt out. Data minimalization. Companies should collect only the data they need per transaction, and safe harbors for companies, amongst other things.
Let me get this straight. Intel, Microsoft, eBay, Republicans, and Democrats agreeing.
Dogs are sleeping with cats.
Wow.
Crazy stuff happening, man. Crazy stuff.
Nobody wants to be tracked on the internet. That's what it comes down to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
RIM co-CEO Mike Lazaridis sat down for an interview with the BBC. It's the eve of the playbook launch. They're on the media tour. But when Mike was pressed about problems RIM has been having in the Middle East and India, particularly around turning over BlackBerry network traffic, security issues, Lazaridis abruptly ended the interview with Rory McClellan saying, "Please, you can't use that, Rory. That's just not fair. It's not fair. Sorry, it's not fair. We've dealt with it. Come on, that's a national security issue." Then he pointed at the camera, which is an amazing move, and said, "Turn that off."
Wow.
Well, the other CEO must have all the calmness.
That's a movie moment.
Yeah.
the co-CEO.
Oh, I mean, you got to watch this video. Go find it if you.
It's on the BBC.
It's on the BBC. It is amazing. He really, what's funny is the India security story has been. I mean, this is months. I think I wrote about it first a year ago.
Yeah.
That answer should be like locked and loaded, right? Because the answer is the BlackBerry network is too secure and the government wants access to it, and we're managing our user security. Not, I'm going to freak out because you question the security of the BlackBerry network. RIM's management has been doing this a lot recently, kind of freaking out at people. And this is just one.
They're feeling the pressure.
Yeah.
If you would like to unlock a Sony product, Sony Ericsson has now made it possible for you to unlock the bootloader for some of its Android phones. The Sony Ericsson blog does warn that this is only for advanced users. So if you want to try out custom ROMs on your phone, go for it. If you want to try the same thing with a PS3, Sony's going to sue your ass off.
Twitter app maker Uber Media is apparently looking into creating its own social network designed to compete with Twitter. The new social network would solve issues that people have with Twitter, like, the length of those messages, 140 characters, who needs it? The new venture would be helpful to Uber Media since it wouldn't have to worry about running into terms of service issues with Twitter like it has in the past. So just, make a competing social network that doesn't work like Twitter, and you're golden.
It sounds like a blog, like Tumblr. PreCentral has an in-depth look at WebOS 3.0 thanks to a beta emulator. Since the OS is running an emulator, they couldn't make any definitive statements on performance. However, the OS looked good, somewhat polished, and it looks like good news for anyone who's waiting for an HP touchpad. Apparently, that's, I believe, according to analysts, 3% of them.
That's Jim and Alice. As far as I know. The Razer Switchblade 7-inch ultra-portable multi-touch gaming machine might not be Vapor hardware. First seen at CES this year, Razer just announced that China will be the first country to get the Switchblade. Now all we need to know is price, release date, specs, and when it's going to come here. Jeez.
Details.
Yeah. All right, let's finish up with the self-wiping hard drive from Toshiba, a family of self-encrypting hard disk drives engineered to automatically invalidate protected data, among other situations, when connected to an unknown host. So you lose that laptop with all those email addresses on it, all that personal data of, confidential WikiLeaks type stuff. When somebody takes that hard drive out and tries to read it, not going to get anything. It's just going to wipe it over.
During your border crossing.
IT professionals are like drooling.
Yeah.
Like, yes.
This sounds like the worst Windows activation error ever. By the way.
Well, that's what I was wondering. It's like, really? Like, what if I just put the wrong host in? Does it just like there's got? I was reading deep to find out what are the safeguards about this, and I haven't seen that.
Are
yet.
you sure?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Are you really sure?
Are you sure this is the right
cannot be
host?
undone.
This is the right host? You're saying this is the host. This is the host you want? Okay.
Do you know what you're doing? Actually, you're about to do something really crazy.
And then Clippy comes up. Hey, it looks like you're trying to change your host.
Would you like some help self-wiping?
It looks like you stole this laptop drive.
All right, let's move on to the calendar.
PSP owners rejoice! Sony's Music Unlimited streaming service is coming to you tomorrow, April 14th. Nintendo is cutting the Wii price to $150 on May 15th. At least that's what a trusted source is telling Engadget. I wonder why they're not waiting until E3 if this is true. If you want to be a Kinect hacker, not a problem. After May 16th, when the Kinect SDK will be released to you, and you can hack it to your heart's content and bring us closer to Minority Report land.
Yay.
It's a wonderful place.
Where advertisements track you.
That's right. BlizzCon tickets are going on sale May 21st, and May 25th, there'll be a $175 a piece, so it's like a first round and a second round. They've gone up steadily. The first 3 years, they were 100. Then they were 125 in 2009 and 150 in 2010. The show takes place in Anaheim, October 21st and 22nd. I hear Ozzy Osbourne will be performing, among others.
No, he performed in the past. It was 2 years ago. And Tenacious D was last year. So that begs the question, who's going to be the big name act?
Ozzy Osbourne.
They'll bring him back.
I don't know.
Sarah says it's Ozzy Osbourne. Start the rumor now.
I was actually, it was funny. I was like, Ozzy Osbourne, really? Okay. BlizzCon. Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, that was 2 years. He was 2 years ago. Acer is expected to launch a 7-inch tablet PC in late April or May called the Iconia Tab A100, according to sources from component makers, and it's expected to be cheaper than the A500, which sounds about right since it's smaller.
And this just in, it looks like Sean Hollister over at Engadget has a post up saying that T-Mobile is denying that they officially announced any rate plans yesterday. The company is announcing a new single-line unlimited plan that is available starting today for $80 per month with an even more plan, no even more plus plan, even though T-Mo News has a press release that they say they got from T-Mobile. So anyway, doesn't matter who's telling the truth. Apparently, no T-Mobile unlimited plan.
You Sprint.
Yeah, that's right.
Take that, T-Mobile.
Look, just sign up for AT&T. Just get out ahead of the curve. There's no point to this.
Let's get to our voicemails. 260-TNT Show is the phone number, and we've got a caller who wants to talk about Windows Vista.
Hey guys, This is Will from Lawrenceville, Georgia. Look, Vista is not a bad operating system. If you don't know how to use something, don't use it. If you don't know how to hammer a nail, use a hammer. It's not the fact that the hammer doesn't work. It's the fact that you don't know how to use it. All right. Thank you for hearing my word.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, guys.
I'm glad you got that off your chest.
Keep up the good work.
Sorry.
I will not try to
Ended
hammer.
on a positive note.
I will not try to hammer nails with my copy of Windows Vista.
That was the most passionate Vista user ever.
Although
I want to know if he's still on Vista. I mean, it's
must
been over a year now, right?
I have to agree. Windows Vista was not horrible. It was not like, we make jokes about Windows Me. It actually wasn't as bad as Windows Me. It was fine. It had to, but it was never adopted. It wasn't great. The fact of adoption rates speak for themselves.
But if you don't know how to use a hammer, Tom, stop hammering.
I'm going to hit myself in the head.
We've all learned that it's just nobody knew how to use it. Nobody knew how to hammer Windows Vista.
Vista was as simple as a hammer, clearly.
Yes.
This is a series of hammers.
Let's move on to our emails, TNT@twit.tv.
Daniel Friesen wrote in, I was watching Tech News Today, episode 219, and thought about something missing from the discussion on how Bing got its numbers. Besides the points that were mentioned in the show, I believe the default search engine for Internet Explorer is Bing. At least that's what it seems to be like in Windows 7. I use infrequently enough, so it's almost a fresh default install. Just as Windows has high numbers because it's what comes with most PCs when you buy a PC, and Internet Explorer comes with a copy of Windows, giving it a high share as the default browser, the fact that Bing is the default search engine, i.e. likely contributes significantly to the number of searches made through Bing. I think Daniel's probably onto something.
Well, yes and no, but that's always been the case. MSN Search was the default in IE before Bing came around.
Right.
And those numbers were never as big as they are now.
True.
So, yes, that does give them a leg up, the way Google being the default search in Firefox and Chrome gives them, those browser stats as well. But that's not all that's going on here, or else we would have seen MSN Search before Bing in such a big way.
Yeah, I don't think anybody ever talked about MSN Search having that big a market share.
Even though they were the default search engine when you installed IE.
And then we got a message from Sharif. Hey, guys, a couple episodes ago, you talked about Adobe's new subscription plan for their Creative Suite software. Iyaz commented that it was a great idea as the subscription fee would go toward the purchase price for the software. So, in essence, it was rent to own. I was intrigued by that comment, so I went to Adobe's website to find out more. Sadly, it's not true. The new subscription model is just that. You pay a monthly fee to access whatever Adobe software you're renting. You stop paying the monthly fee and you lose access to the software. The fee does not go towards purchasing the software. So, for example, and he goes into the actual math on this, I, for one, am very disappointed as I was really looking forward to upgrading my aging CS3 software. Thanks a lot, Iyaz, for raising my hopes. But
so what we ran into is the statement was after you've rented it for a year, you get the opportunity to buy, which is why we called it rent to own. But so what exactly is going on at the end of the year?
I double checked, and speaking to Ars Technica, an Adobe spokesperson said this, and this is a quote: the subscription offering is not a payment plan. However, a customer is eligible to pay upgrade pricing for a new version of his suite or application if they completed a 1-year subscription plan or a 6-month monthly subscription plan, which is actually, I would think, is a much lower rate because the upgrade prices are always way lower.
Yeah,
than
so
the actual full version.
you do get a benefit.
So you get a discount.
That's the rent to own,
right?
But it's not everything you've paid. There's some finance charges.
So thanks for keeping me honest on that one.
That way. All right, thanks, Nilay, for hanging out with us again on TNT. Love to have you. Let folks know, once again, what you're up to, where to find the podcast you're doing, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. We're doing our new podcast. It's me, Josh, and Paul, and a bunch of other people at thisismynextpodcast.com. Tomorrow, 6:30 will be our next show, and then we'll be doing them weekly. So come hang out with us. We'll be talking about our new site and our new project a bunch. And I'll be back to bother you guys again and bug you.
We'll definitely have you back, Nilay. It's always great to have you on the show. Thanks to everybody for watching. Twit.tv/TNT is the place to find us. 260-TNT show is the phone number, and TNT@twit.tv is the email address. We'll see you tomorrow.